Okay, good evening everyone. So, we'll be beginning with our current affair analysis with the first page of the Hindu. The headline reads IMF gives C grade for India's national account statistics. So, in the recent context, even in the morning we were discussing the same things. Our accounting standards and the way we are collecting statistics is brought under question recently. The case to the point being, one of the issues is logistics sector. Another case to the point being, the citation here is with respect to entire GDP calculation sometimes, national account statistics. What is the issue? There is a mismatch between what the world thinks is right and what is actually portrayed by the government here. This is the funda. So just the headlines will suffice for now. There is a discrepancy in the methodology that Indian government is following and what is expected from the statistic community entire. So this is the gist of this article. SC asks government to regulate user content on internet. Court suggests that impartial and autonomous authority to vet content. It says that like free speech, rights of victims of online abuse have to be protected. What do you think is the necessity to regulate this online content? Yes? Basically, the vulnerable sections, let's say for example women, young women, adolescent, even teenage girls. Imagine a deep fake or some kind of misinformation, either a deep fake or some kind of a misinformation is disrupting the normalcy of an individual or an entire community. Is it desirable? No. Just like how hate speech is a blot on free speech. This kind of misutilization of social media is also a blot on the idea of free speech. And state as a protector is supposed to enforce this. And that is the overall funda here. If there is any concrete action on this activity, we will further have this news. For now, this is enough. But one point here, look at this. At one point, referring to the easy access to uncurated material online, the court said a few seconds of adult content warning was not enough. They were trying to say if Aadhaar can be linked to the internet usage. But again, it goes against the principle of privacy. So that's the contentious debate. It's not the job of the court to legislate, and therefore it is just giving a suggestion and leaving it at that. Okay, moving forward. There aren't many important articles, but this specific article is important because we are dealing with the article 33 here. What is article 33? Anyone? Is it a fundamental right? Is it a fundamental right? It comes under part 3, but is it a fundamental right? What is article 33? So the parliament can restrict the fundamental rights of the armed forces personnel. Right? And why is it that the court doesn't involve here? What's the logic? Okay, let's talk about the constitutional design. Why should national security be placed only under parliament? Why not put it under judiciary? No, I agree that fundamental rights and the decisions should be something that need not be regulated. That's what the court believes if you are an armed personnel. But why? And why should it be placed only under the parliament, why not under judiciary? Exactly. What is the but if rights are violated, then why are armed forces treated differently than normal people? Basically, the funda is very simple. When you are representing an institution like the armed forces, collective consciousness becomes more important than an individual consciousness. And that collective consciousness is anyway decided by the philosophy of the constitution, established by the preamble. Now, it is in this context the entire case that we are going to discuss is debated. There's one armed forces officer, his name is Samuel Kamaleshan. Basically what happened is, there is a regiment parade going on, and that officer had been practicing his own religion. So he refused to enter into the sanctorum or the temple. And this is treated as a order that is being defied. And court martial decided that he shall be let go. He is dismissed from the armed forces for defiance. See, the overall logic that you have to understand here is, you cannot afford to disobey armed forces command. And Supreme Court refused to intervene because it goes against the very principle of the Article 33. So now the writer here is raising a moral question. If you are not allowing rights of the minority, they don't feel safe, is the argument raised here. But the fundamental premise itself, according to me, is flawed. It doesn't matter if that person is a majority or a minority, if that person is representing any community. These are secular institutions, democratic institutions. More than any other place, armed forces do not have any place for religious bias. Right? So let's invert the case. We should look at a majority, a armed forces personnel from the majority, when he is supposed to enter into a minority worship place. That officer, if it's a part of the drill, he should enter that place. It doesn't matter if he's a majority community, person from a majority community or a minority community. But the author says that this is a moral dilemma because we are losing an officer, we are refusing the rights of the armed forces. They don't have rights as much as a normal citizen. That is the whole point of Article 33. That is the whole point of a secular democratic institution. It's armed forces institution. It's not a representative institution. It is purely based on merit. When I say merit here, the merit is dedication to the collective consciousness that they stand for. That is the only thing that should take precedence. So I refuse to accept all these arguments made on the fundamental premise that the author did not understand the spirit of Article 33. So you should be careful when you make arguments like this, because you don't lose sight of the very first principle that is established there. You cannot compare the rights of ordinary citizens in a context of armed forces. Otherwise, there is a risk of politicization of even armed forces. So therefore, I think this decision taken is right. If, let's say for example, if a Hindu is refusing to enter into a mosque as a part of the tradition, I don't think the court should behave in any other way, and it is the right thing to do. Okay? So this is what we should be focusing on. Let's read this once. When duty meets conscience, the real test lies in finding a way for both to coexist. I don't really understand why it is equated with lack of conscience here. So are you saying that your conscience is prioritizing your personal bias over national duty? If yes, that officer doesn't belong to the armed forces. He should probably be one of us. We all have our primordial identities and we subscribe to that identity. And that's the reason why armed forces personnel are placed on one pedestal above normal people. They deserve that respect because of all the things they sacrifice for us. You can't expect the same respect while you also behave like one of us. So this argument is probably biased in my opinion because it doesn't really stand any merit. Not at least in the context of armed forces. Enabling a modern and future ready labor ecosystem. Now, we know the context. There were 4 labor codes which were fragmented. Labor is a state driven subject and we needed to amalgamate all the multiple scenario driven, state driven, sector driven laws into coherent codes. It's been like 4 years, 5 years since we came up with this. I remember making one entire series on the same thing, labor laws for EPFO exam in 2020. And 5 years later, we had a notification. Maybe some of you might be writing the EPFO exam tomorrow. I think tomorrow or day after. Whenever it is. If you are running short of time, look at the labor laws series that is made. There are 8 videos. You can go and watch that in the YouTube channel. The Vikas YouTube channel. You can go and watch it. Apart from that, coming back, it's been 5 years. In this 5 years, we have been having multiple instances where these labor codes were discussed. People were eagerly waiting, when will this be notified? So it is in this context, I want to explain the gist of this article in a question answer format, mains question answer format. Take a look at the heading, enabling a modern and future ready labor ecosystem. So I'll give you a question. In the context of the recent enforcement of the labor code, explain how they will facilitate a future ready labor ecosystem and thereby facilitate economic growth. This is the question, for example. In short, how will the labor code help in economic growth? So, the larger premise is that what is the larger premise? See, if you have labor laws which are easy to comply with, all the stakeholders will be happy. Who are the stakeholders broadly? Laborers and employees, as in technically all the workers and employers. These are the 2 broad categories of the stakeholders. Of course, you have the government, which is acting like a mediating agent. So these labor force, when you look at from the standpoint of the employers, were supposed to facilitate ease of doing business. And when you are looking from the standpoint of labor, they are enforcing operational safety, social security, and some kind of wage guarantee. Okay? So 3 broad codes meant for protecting the labor. So together, the 4th code and the 3 codes, if you combine all of them, the 4 codes are supposed to propel India's growth story because it will enforce ease of doing business and stable labor laws. It will make hiring more formalized. if you take a look at the structure of the Indian economy, it's broadly informal in nature. So, formalization of economy, why is it important, guys? Tax bracket is a later, um, proposition. Even if you are taxing most of them, 90% of the country will fall under zero tax bracket. The bigger agenda here is to have exact data to understand our economic situation. Formalization will give some element of clarity on how we take our economic policy decisions, both on monetary policy side and the fiscal policy side. Okay, so that's the first agenda. Second agenda is that it will lead to wage discovery. If you know the number of people who are competent enough to, do a job, and you bring them on a common platform, you get a better price discovery. Imagine a situation where there is this remote job. If you don't have a portal which will connect all these remote workers, maybe the local people will exploit. Let's say, for example, a farmer will sell his produce for a very low cost. If he knows that there is a market elsewhere and he can sell his goods online and later ship it, he'll discover a better price, right? So, when you formalize an economy and bring them onto a common platform, it's going to create something called the economies of scale. And two, it will lead to better discovery of the right skill talent pool. And then for the existing players, you will have better conditions. You will have a guarantee. Imagine a construction worker. If there is a mishap at the site, you don't have an insurance. Ideally, you are supposed to have, but they don't have an insurance. And you don't know your rights and you can't enforce those rights. In the olden days, in the socialist economy, we have had this trade union concept, which was seen as a major roadblock by the employers because negotiating terms were never aligned. Factory owners wanted more profits, these people wanted more salaries, and there was always a constant tussle. So much so that almost 15-20 years ago, in a Maruti factory in Haryana, workers assassinated a manager. They pelted him to death, brutally attacked in a conflict. Manager was just doing his job. He had no control over the situation. But he lost his job. He lost his life. So situations like this, especially in the context of discussions with respect to services, IT services, there was always this debate whether even service sector should have this trade union. Did you ever see a trade union for service sector? IT employees trade union coming out, doing hartals, saying that we want wage hike. Because market took care of the salaries. The best got, rewarded. And why? I would say majorly it's because of agglomeration. Like you are all bringing them on a common platform. Do you think people would have been happy to pay to a taxi without bargaining if it were not for Uber, Ola? Drivers wouldn't have accepted for lower fares. Passengers wouldn't have accepted for higher fares. And it's a constant tussle where both the parties look at each other with some suspicion. Even after agreeing, you don't know you will reach the destination safely. Even if you reach there, you don't know if you'll ask extra. That entire tension is taken away now. How? Even if the auto is running on a meter. How many of you know auto meters exist? You know that, right? Did you ever use it? How many of you actually used an auto meter? A digital one, did you know the manual one? If you actually attach a magnet, it will run faster. And during my school days, the auto driver used to tell us that the person who used to take us that he actually showed us a magnet. And I was curious the other day, like, so I placed one more magnet from my home in the opposite direction. It got stuck. So the meter wasn't running. So one day he was asking, why isn't this running? Then I told him that I placed a magnet just to check. So after a few days, he came back and told me that he transitioned to a digital meter. If that is tampered, you can't even do anything. No magnet can do. You can only cut the wire. From that era, now we have a platform where agglomeration economies are working in our favor. When you know that the algorithm has got no incentive to specifically target you. If it targets everyone. If it wants to loot, it will loot everyone equally. So now the auto wallas are not happy, the passengers are not happy, but Uber CEO is very happy. Initially, you offer free rides. Give 150 off, 200 off. Once you are used to it, hike it. Recover everything with interest. Nobody questions now. So this is the power of agglomeration, and for agglomeration you need a rules based order. Whether it is international relations, whether it is any market, there are always rules. And to create that rules, who is best positioned? The government. As an enforcer of the social contract between the individual and the state, they have to come up with rules, and labor laws are no exception. So in order to balance both inclusive growth, social security, safety nets, and also the ease of doing business, these labor laws came into existence. Now, to prove that point, you have to go to the each 4 labor codes. There are some specific provisions, like say for example, mandatory EPF contribution, some percentage will be there. So and so number of employees, if the company has so and so number of employees, over and above that, you will have to comply with this law. When you can use these provisions, map each of the provisions to substantiate your claim. Before it was bad, now it is regularized. Therefore, it will lead to a stable ecosystem. This is the format of your argumentation structure for your answer writing, so that you can translate whatever newspaper that you see, content you see here, into an actionable answer framework. Okay? So first understand the logic. The logic part we have discussed. Now all it takes is go to each of the code, 4 codes, pick up 4 provisions. Tell each of this provision is impacting in positive way. For example, operational safety. Prior to this, there was no safety. Because of this provision, now we have safety. Before, after. That comparison is good enough to say we have a future ready ecosystem. And this is how you have to make notes for this labor codes topic. It is literally impossible to by heart all the 4 codes. You are not supposed to do that. Each code is meant to solve a purpose. What is that purpose? Identify that. Wages code. What is the overarching principle of the wages code? To ensure wage guarantee and at the same time give some stability to the companies so that there is no unpredictability. It is balancing the needs of both the stakeholders. Social security, both the stakeholders. Like this, all the 4 codes, you take it before, after. That's it. You can move forward. Okay, one more part. If you get a question, why do you think India needs it now? At present times, you have to talk about this demographic dividend, how we are struggling to create jobs, and why a legal guarantee is good for both the employers as well as the employees. Clear? Why India struggles to clear its air? What do you think is the answer? Simplistic answer? Why is it existing? What do you mean by the silos based approach? No coordination between? I'll take a step back and say there is no coordination between people and government in the first place. Do we want pollution? Are we ready to give up some comforts? Not really. Then how can we arrive at a middle ground? Let's enforce a plastic ban. Are you okay to carry bags all the time? It's not easy, but it requires some effort. Nothing is easy. We are used to some comforts from our childhood, and suddenly a transition is supposed to happen. Personally, I dislike one thing in our day-to-day culture. Let's say, for example, how many of us don't like plastic? Or how many of us wish that plastic has an alternative? When you are at a function, the next time, when you pick up a 500 liter or that small bottle, the minimum that you can do is put it in your pocket when you just take a sip. Don't take a sip and throw it away in the dustbin. We can all do this, right? One of the saddest part is this transition towards quickness. We want everything to be quick and comfortable, and it comes at a cost. Let's say I'm just thirsty. I just want to take one sip. Either there is a plastic bottle or a plastic glass. So I'll pick up a bottle. It's neither too small nor too big. So people, if you notice in any functions nowadays, they just have either 1/4 or half and throw away the bottle. If it is a glass, they will just take a sip or two and throw away the glass. So much of plastic is generated at the end of the event. So much of food is wasted. So, as a culture, we should, inculcate this habit, that minimalism, and it starts with us. I'm not just talking about plastic. Same is the case with our attitude towards any natural resource. We all want our homes to be clean. See, all of us are consciously tuned to throw away dust on the road, like any litter. It takes a lot of practice. Personally, I don't want to be a hypocrite. Not until the Swachh Bharat mission came, and even in the Swachh Bharat mission initial days, what was a habit of throwing on the roads, because it was never a part of our culture to keep our roads clean. Because in my mind, somehow the attitude was, even when my mom or my dad told me that you shouldn't throw it on the road, I saw sweepers cleaning on the road in my childhood. So I thought, anyway they'll clean it the next day, I'll just throw it on the road. Not until the Swachh Bharat mission and repeated, rebuttals from my parents, I realized that, okay, there's a point after I started this preparation. Sometimes when I don't see dustbins, that old habit kicks in. I try not to do that. But it takes effort from all of us, right? We're all guilty of doing that. Let's not pretend like we're always clean and protecting our environmentalists. We're not environmentalists. Had it been the case, India would have been a different situation. Why all this philosophical gyan? Because that is the overarching principle that dictates the failure of every policy. It starts with us. It can end with us. Maybe the next generation can unlearn the practices, pass on the baton to the further generations in a better way. But I don't think Delhi has that much time. We've got to fix the root causes because Delhi is choking. Air quality of 500, 600, 800, 900, and God knows how much over and above that, because the meters are just tuned to 1000. So why are we failing? First, I would say the article starts with saying that we have silos based approach, but I'll take a step back and say it requires commitment both from the people as well as the politicians, the policymakers. It's a collective will. One step behind, let's take a step behind and see. There's no point in blaming each other. We need as many people as we can to mobilize them and bring them onto the common platform, because no single individual is guilty of this, but collectively we are all involved in this. You can't blame one government over the other. When Aam Aadmi Party was there, they were blaming Aam Aadmi Party. Now the BJP is there. From the local government till the national government, BJP is there. What can they do? Let's say if I want to clean the, or maybe extend the road on this Ashok Nagar roads, do you think the private property owners will donate it for larger good? Do you think the factories in and around Delhi, they'll give up just because air pollution is there? Until and unless you can stop all of them together. But if you stop all of them together, how about the people that are residing there? How about the people dependent on those factories? It's like the chicken and egg problem. Which one should we start first? Vacate Delhi first or clean the industries? If you clean the industries, what's the point in staying in Delhi? How do we solve this problem? People can write, it's a silos based approach, there is no governance, coordinated governance. All these issues we know. We are almost reactive in our approaches, not proactive. So I think the solution begins with not by completely eliminating, but grab the low-hanging fruits first. For example, if you can protect the two-wheelers and three-wheelers, those guys who are using those vehicles from pollution, do something about it. So the best thing that probably we can do is move them towards mass urban transport, increase the capacity of metro. If they are using four-wheelers, transition them from, let's say, a fossil fuel based to solar generated e-vehicles. Of course, they don't work in winters. That's a different thing. We'll have to figure out an alternative for that. Maybe moving towards hydrogen is the answer for India. Hydrogen based fuel. But what are the low hanging fruits first? Let's address them first, and together this silos based approach should not continue anyway. Together address the issue. Okay? So this is what the article is saying. Rest of the points you have seen them multiple times. So pollution is not just a technical issue. It's not just an environmental problem. It's a federal problem. It's a political administrative problem. It's a transnational problem because that's impacting other countries too, our neighbors too. The only way we can fix this is by coming together, agreeing upon a common agenda, and grab the low hanging fruits first. Sometimes you'll have to let go of some finances. And that's why at the COP30 summit, we are no longer talking about mitigation but adaptation. Because we can't stop pollution now. We are almost at an inflection point. I'm not saying we should give up. Instead of trying to wish that the pollution goes away and blaming each other, first we adapt, survive, and then think of the solution. Okay? So the larger theme that you can pick up is air governance. Water governance, air governance, land governance. All the natural resources are fragmented between various ministries and state governments. Unless and until we take our entire natural resources on a common platform and treat it like a continuum, we will not be able to solve the natural resource problem. Whether it is water, whether it is air, land, forest degradation, land degradation, water pollution, both surface and underground, air pollution, all of them require a centralization mechanism rather than decentralized one. So you have to know where we have to move towards the center and where we have to move towards the state. This requires not just a national level coordination but a global level coordination. Okay? Why is Srinagar, why are Srinagar's traditional livelihoods struggling to survive? See, I am giving this article as a self-explanatory article, but I just wanted to highlight how you should view this. People are impacted not just by politics. Politics, climate change, culture, geography, economy, security situation, ethics. All of this, whatever syllabus pointer that you see, there will be a figment of that which will impact human lives. So, depending on the paper, you need to retrieve that information and use it accordingly. In this case, when we are talking about, let's treat this like a case study. Look at this. How are wetlands, lakes, mountains shaping Srinagar's economy? So, the overall funda here is your geography will decide your economy, it will decide your culture, and therefore these two will decide your identity, and identity will decide your political ambition, political status. Clear? What role did Article 370's dilution play in local livelihoods? So you might get a question on this sometimes, before and after. It's been like, let's say for example, 5 years since Article 370's or 6 years since Article 370. So always imagine how was life before Article 370 and after. So you should not argue just based on this specific article alone. You should not argue that it is all good or all bad. There is good and bad in both the decisions, before, after. So, as a policy maker, you are supposed to see the good and the bad and balance between those two. And this is what we should be looking at. See here. What changed after the dilution of Article 370? The dissolution of the statehood status, communication blackouts made it difficult for economic institutions. So tourism had a bad hit initially. Okay? Even here. So many street vendors and women workers in informal markets earn very little. Even that is impacted now. So why does the metropolitan capital infusion model falls short? Many growth plans for Srinagar treat it as a recipient of large capital flows, real estate, basically money. But when local governance is weak, traditional livelihoods are ignored, ecological base is compromised, this model fails. Srinagar was supposed to be a smart city. Why is it failing? Because when you ignore the local conditions, a top-down approach, a formulaic approach which worked elsewhere will not work here because you are disrespecting the fundamental principle of geography. You cannot bring an IT city in a zone like Kashmir. Just giving an example, right? You can establish one company, but you cannot create that agglomeration effect that you had in a city like Hyderabad, Chennai, Bangalore, Gurgaon. Why? Because there are various other factors which you will study in GS1, locational factors. Okay, so when you get articles like this, don't treat it like information about Srinagar. Nobody will ask you what is the livelihood of Srinagar, why is it impacted like that. Take it like a case study. Observe it, analyze it from the lens of geography, culture, society, economy and polity. Okay, that's it for the day. Thank you.